Aloha and welcome to part 11 of my Foundations of Yoga video series. In the next and final 3 videos of the series, I'm going to be talking about the psychology of yoga. Transformation, change, growth, actualizing potential. These are very positive sounding ideals that most people who do yoga strive for. Yet, all of us who are involved in any growth process face resistance. In yoga, there is resistance in the tissue, resistance to doing yoga, resistance to changing habits and lifestyles. But resistance does not need to be conquered. You can learn to use resistance as a teacher. Your resistance can teach you where your habits and attachments lie. Resistance can also teach you where you block yourself and where you are self-protective. In order to go into this, consider more of the mental aspects of yoga. That the mind and body affect each other is obvious. Psychological tensions live in the musculature. When you are uptight, you are literally tightening the muscles and blocking energy. Through years of accumulated tensions, the body becomes a repository for the unconscious, in that it learns to close off different physical areas that affect emotional states. For instance, a compressed chest literally makes it harder to experience deep emotions. The strength of the emotions that may come from opening your chest can make you uncomfortable, so you may resist opening that area. So much of what limits our yoga practice is not in the body itself, but rather mental attitudes and habits. Resistance in postures exists in the mind as well as in the body. Mental and emotional resistance can take many forms: forgetting, excuses, laziness, and even illness and injuries. If you can minimize mental and emotional resistance, that is the key to eventually working through your physical resistance. As you get deeper into physical yoga, it becomes increasingly necessary to get to know the nature of the mind. Most of us totally identify with our mind, calling it ourselves, without realizing it is just one of the systems that makes up a human being. The importance of the mind is enormous, and its power is so great that it often ignores, subverts, or overrides the other systems that have their own intelligence. Though yoga can make you more attuned to the wisdom within the tissue, it is the mind that must interpret this. How the mind interprets is directly related to its nature and its experiences or its conditioning. We don't usually think of the mind as structured or conditioned because our mind is like a lens that we view ourselves and the world through, a given that we rarely question. Yet, there are principles to how the mind works, just like there are principles to how the body works. Understanding how the mind operates opens up the mind and body to unimagined possibilities and is a doorway to transformation. Looking at resistance can reveal the nature of the mind, for what we are resisting is often the very thing we say we want. Why do I do yoga at all? How much of my yoga is fueled by fear? Fear of aging, fear of dying, of losing energy? How much of my yoga is driven by ambition? For accomplishment, for higher states of consciousness, for youth and health, for vibrancy? Of course, We all have fears and ambitions that we bring to yoga. The problem is not that we have them, but rather that they take over our yoga, often unconsciously. When this happens, the mind is oriented to either the past or the future and loses contact with the living process of yoga. How the muscles feel, the energy being generated, the subtle changes which require great attention. If you become aware of how the motives that underlie fear and ambition can limit your practice, this does not necessarily eliminate them or your other reasons for doing yoga. It can, however, help you put them aside during your practice so that you can be less mechanical and more present and attentive. Have you ever asked yourself why you do things that you know aren't good for you? Not how do I stop, but why do I do them at all? Another way of asking is, what is the nature of self-destruction? Most of us think we would like to have more energy, but if we look carefully and honestly, we see that we keep our energy controlled within safe boundaries. If our energy gets too low, the fabric of our life falls apart. We need a certain amount of energy to keep it together. Less obviously, if your energy gets too high, it can push you out of your habits and the security and pleasures they are linked to. Many activities take a certain level of energy, some high, others low. For example, you can't watch television if your energy is too high, for you become restless. If, for whatever reason, you are attached to watching television, you may overeat to bring your energy down. Here you are unconsciously controlling your energy with overeating in order to preserve a pleasure. Doing yoga properly increases energy, which pushes against mental and physical habits, while the habits, by their nature, resist change. Some habits can be looked upon as a way of resisting change by hooking you to immediate gratification, which is a powerful source of conditioning. The taste of food, for example, can give immediate pleasure. The power of taste makes it difficult not to let it rule you, which can put you out of touch with using food for energy and nourishment. The feeling of being out of control, unable to resist temptation, is usually a sign of physical or psychological addiction and has mechanical aspects that keep you on automatic. You may think the pleasure is not worth the pain it will cause, yet it is still often surprisingly difficult to resist it. Self-destruction involves, among other things, going for an immediate pleasure, even though the end result is pain. Part of the resistance to doing yoga stems from a deep reluctance to let go of the pleasures within the addictions. Doing yoga awarely can unhook you from these habits and addictions. And that's it for this episode. We'll continue with the psychology of yoga in the next episode.